Hello, I'm Reverend Scott Wipperman, pastor here at First Presbyterian Church in Helena, Montana, and we welcome you to our worship service today. I'd like you to know that regardless of who you are or where you are in your journey of faith, you're welcome here at First Presbyterian Church. And our gospel reading today comes from the Gospel of John, a familiar story of him healing a man that has been blind. As he went along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" And Jesus replied, "Neither this man or his parents sinned, but this happened so that the work of God might be displayed in his life." Jesus places the mud on the eyes of the man and tells him to go off to the pool to be washed, and the man's sight is restored. Then they brought to the Pharisees the man who had been blind. Now the day on which Jesus had made the mud and opened the man's eyes was the Sabbath. Therefore the Pharisees also asked him how he had received his sight. "He put mud on my eyes," the man replied, "and I washed, and now I see." Some of the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath." But others asked, "How can a sinner do such miraculous signs?" So they were divided. Finally, they turned again to the blind man. "What have you to say about him? It was your eyes that he opened." The man replied, "He is a prophet." The Jews still did not believe that he had been blind and had received his sight until they sent for the man's parents. "Is this your son?" they asked. "Is this the one you say was born blind? How is it that he now can see?" "We know he is our son," the parents answered, "and we know that he was born blind, but how he can see now or who opened his eyes, we don't know. Ask him. He's of age. He will speak for himself." A second time they summoned the man who had been blind. "Give glory to God," they said. "We know this man is a sinner." He replied, "Whether he's a sinner or not, I do not know. One thing I do know, I was blind, but now I see." Then they asked him, "What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" He answered, "I have told you already. You did not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too?" Then they hurled insults at him and said, "You are this fellow's disciple. We are disciples of Moses, and we know that God spoke to Moses. But as for this fellow, we don't even know where he has come from." The man answered, "Now that is remarkable. You don't know where he comes from, yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners. He listens to the godly man who does his will. Nobody has ever heard of opening the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing." To this they replied, "You were steeped in sin at birth. How dare you lecture us?" And they threw him out. The word of the Lord. Well, here's mud in your eye. Here's mud just about everywhere but your eyes. And here's how to keep mud from getting into your eyes. And here's mud in your eyes. The old English toast. It's not really clear about the origins of this toast, of where it came from. Some people think it is when you were drinking your beer with gusto and you really tilted that glass up to get the last bit, and maybe if the draft you were drinking was not such high quality, that the dregs in the bottom of the glass would fall into your eye. And so, hence, here's mud in your eye. Others think it may have been also a drinking toast, but that it came more from as a kind of a condolence. Maybe you've just lost a match of rugby or something, and you're there at the bar and you're trying to console yourselves over the loss. And so, here's mud in your eye was a reference to that had you been in a horse race and been in the back of the pack, you certainly would have had mud in your eye from the horses that were in front of you. But I don't think this is what Jesus was referring to. When he put mud in the eye of the man and told him, "Go and wash in the pool of Siloam." It's interesting. Why go wash in the pool? Why not just have the man see immediately? Maybe it was a test to see if the man would follow some simple instructions. Maybe Jesus didn't want to draw attention to himself and the fact of this miracle that he'd done with all the people around, so he sent the man off to receive his sight in some distant place, some place away from the crowd. But Jesus did say, "Here's mud in your eye. Now go lead a new life." He gave sight where sight had never been before. And if I get my finger to go the right direction, this would work better. Now, when Jesus did miracles, normally they brought about some great healing. But even more important than the healing they brought about was the fact that through the miracle, he restored the people to the community that they were with. Here with the 10 lepers, when he healed them and sent them off to see the Pharisees, because the Pharisees were the one who proclaimed whether you were clean or dirty. So he sent them off to the Pharisees to proclaim that they were now clean, that they could come back into society, that they could be with the people. So his miracles not only brought about a physical restoration, they brought back a connection, a reconnection. People that had been disenfranchised and been forgotten were re-enfranchised into society and into families. They were given hope. The stigma of them being an outsider and wanted was removed. But not so much in this story. Jesus sends the man off to wash in the bath alone. And then some people do bring him to the Pharisees for them to declare that he is now clean, that he is sighted. But he stands alone in his discussion with the Pharisees. And they question him. Just like some of the people doubted as to whether this is the man who had been blind now that he could see, the Pharisees doubt and question him, setting him apart. They call on his parents to see if this is the man that was blind. And the parents don't even particularly stand with him because of fear of being thrown out of the temple, out of the synagogue. They stand away from him and say, "Ask him, he's of age." And then in the second questioning, the Pharisees ridicule and put down this man. He stood alone. But it is in the end of the story. Christ comes and stands with this person. Christ seeks him out when he hears that he had been alone and comes by him. And this man who had no sight, who didn't see the person that put the mud in his eyes and told him to go to the bath and wash, this man with his new sight sees God face to face. Here he is in the very presence of light and life, of sight and truth. Now, the readings in today's scriptures were all about sight and light. We didn't read 1 Samuel's reading. That was one of the lectionaries reading. In that story, it's when Samuel is being called to appoint a successor to Saul. And God leads Samuel over to Bethlehem, to Jesse, and says the new leader will be one of Jesse's sons. And so Samuel looks at the oldest son and says, aha, this is the one. He's big and strong and rooty. But God says, no, not him. And he looks at the second son and he goes, oh, that must be it. And God again says, no, not him. And he goes through 7 of Jesse's 8 sons. And God keeps saying, not this one. And then finally they bring the youngest, David, out from the field where he's tending the sheep. And Samuel might have been thinking, this little one? And God said, yes, this one. This is the one you should have been seeing. In the epistle reading, Paul is talking about us being in the dark. Well, actually, he said, if you caught it, you are dark. Not that you are sighted, but you're just in a dark room and you can't see right now. But you are dark. But then he goes on to say, just step into the light. Just step into the light and you'll be illuminated. And you will become light yourself. And then the story with Jesus and the blind man. Yes, it's a story about restoring sight, but it's also a story about blindness. Because the story opens with the disciples asking Jesus, was this man blind due to his sin or his parents' sin? And Jesus says, nah, neither of those. And in the story near the end, you have the Pharisees falling into the same blindness, the same assumption. They tell this man, you were born in sin because he was born blind, assuming that either he or his parents had done something wrong. But again, they were the ones not seeing. This man that was blind had been given sight. He could see. He saw that Jesus was a prophet. He could see, finally came face to face with God himself. So, are we dark? Are we blind? Do we do dark deeds that are nice to hide where there's not much light? That we don't like it when the light brings them to light? We have this strange new source of light called the internet. And it's bringing to light all kinds of dark deeds that people thought that maybe they could hide. Things are getting exposed that had long generally been under the rug. There was an NBA player that was recently fined $50,000 because as he was walking off the court, he said something back to the fans that were taunting him from the opposing team, something not particularly nice. Of course, someone happened to be recording it on their cell phone. And when it came out, the league fined him $50,000 for saying that. But it's so easy to see what we want to see, isn't it? Jill Duffield, the editor of The Outlook, said, I failed to see the pain of others. I dismissed pervasive, systematic sin and its devastating effects because I was so much a part of it. I benefited from it so much that I didn't recognize it, or at least I didn't want to recognize it. Why? Why do we do this? Because the status quo is working for us, right? We're pretty good where we are. We prefer to go with what we know and not try something new or something different, or listen to that thing that may upset our status quo and tell us we need to do something different. But Jill went on. Apparently God has, and almost always has had, other plans. God sees in ways we don't. And the only chance we have of getting a glimpse of what the heavenly vision is to wake up and pay close attention, to capitulate to God's choices instead of our own, and to listen to those often dismissed by the people around them. You know, the youngest son, the Samaritan woman, beggars blind from birth. What they say may well wake us up from our stupor, challenge our assumptions, and cause us to be more than a little uncomfortable. Great. Just what we need. More news about how we're falling short. More things to do to try to be a good Christian, huh? But this was not Christ, not Paul's intent. You notice Christ put mud on the man's eyes and said, "Go wash in a pool." He didn't say, "Drop and give me 100." Or make it to the top of Mount Helena before the mud dries. No, it was something simple. Go wash. And the man's eyes saw for the first time. He was in the light. So step into the light. Become illuminated. And being illuminated, you become the light. That's what Paul tells us. So step, become. In the becoming we change, and then we are light that shines on others. Christ gave this man sight, but maybe the biggest thing he did was come along beside him and show this man that he was wanted, that he belonged, that he was cared for. So light, this is the promise. Step into it. Become illuminated. You become the light, and you shine on others. Like last week's story, I talked about this woman. Remember? She's in the airport, and a man who had bought a ticket for his then 1-year-old daughter is there with her to catch the flight, but she turned 2 just a week or 2 before. And now she's not able to fly free with him. And this man is distraught and he doesn't know what to do. And he's creating somewhat of a scene, crying there in the front of the line. And it would have been very easy not to see this man, just to look the other way. But she looked and she went. And she bought a ticket for this man's daughter. The light. Petunia was a bad risk. When Petunia was just 4 weeks old, a shelter rescued her. She had a broken leg, broken rib, and a stomach full of carpet. And after she had healed, a family came to the shelter. And a dog that had been abused so early from life may not have been a good pet to pick. But this family chose Petunia, and they took her home and gave her a loving family to live with, and changed her name to Peanut for a new life that she was having. But Peanut went berserk 10 days ago. She was running up and down the stairs, barking and yelping, acting like crazy, and finally her owners opened the back door and let her out, and she took off into the backyard and didn't stop in the backyard, but kept running into the field behind the house. And so the owners started pursuing her and chased. She was barking and yelping, and she ran out into the field until she got to a ditch and stopped at the ditch and was barking. And they finally caught up with her and looked down into the ditch, and there was a naked, shivering child out in this 32-degree temperature in the ditch. The man took off his sweatshirt and picked up the young girl and wrapped her up and took her back into the house. And they called 911 to get the medics there. And they say the only word she was able to say by the time the medics got there was doggy. A shelter that took in an abused dog. A family that adopted it and brought it into a loving environment. A dog that had some kind of sixth sense about something being wrong and help being needed. Light. A 19-year-old walked 5 miles every day to go to his job at the UPS store, or the UPS sorting location. He had to be there at 4 a.m. in the morning. You know, this is where they bring all the trucks from the airports that just got all the packages that came off the planes. They bring them into the sorting facility, and then the sorting facility parcels them out to the trucks that are going to go deliver them that day in the neighborhood. And for a year and a half, this boy had been walking there to earn $11.90 an hour to help his ailing mother. And then at the end of the shift, which was a part-time shift, he would walk back those 5 miles to home. And all the people he worked with were in similar situations. They didn't earn a lot of money. These weren't the drivers. These were the sorters. These are the people that handled the packages. And they came together and they raised over $1,500 to buy this young man a used Jeep so that he could drive to work and help support his mother. Light. Children with Down syndrome usually don't have the most friends at school. And Carly was one of those girls. Shaden was a young boy, a tall, handsome man at school, and he was a friend with Carly. Now, Carly's favorite snacks were Doritos. And so, Sheldon gave her a t-shirt. On the front it said, "I may not be nacho typical Dorito." And on the back it said, "I'm going to be cheesy and ask, will you go with me to the prom?" And they went and had a wonderful time. Light. A teacher saw that one of her students was sad, and she went up to this young girl and said, "What's the matter?" And the young girl related how she had been bullied by other students. They told her that her hair was ugly. And the teacher said, at that time, the only thing I could tell her was that she was wonderful, and she shouldn't care about what the other students were saying. The next day, the teacher came with the exact same hairstyle as the young girl. Light. So this is nothing hard. Christ isn't asking us to do what is impossible. Christ is simply inviting us to see those things that maybe so often we miss, that we overlook. Be open to the sights that are around us. Be open to those voices that may be asking us to change, to do something different, that may be giving us a different piece of information. Whether that voice is coming from someone creating a scene in the line, or maybe that voice is the barking and yelping of a dog. Maybe that voice is a young child or a stranger or someone who's not socially acceptable. Jesus is just saying, look and listen. Because if you do, you'll be stepping into the light. And once you step into the light, you become illuminated. And when you become illuminated, you become the light. And then you can step out and shine it on all. And who knows, you might just come face to face with Jesus Christ in this light. You just may see the Lord who has offered you this invitation. So here's mud in your eye. So go. Step into the light.